So today what we'll be discussing is we'll be looking into a few other options and a few other main important topics within Synapse, especially when it comes to exam. And I think we can also run some queries and see, right? Yesterday I've just explained you the different modules and components we have within this. But let's try to run some queries and see which query you can run on SQL pool, which query or which code you can execute on Spark pool, that kind of stuff we see. And then we'll try to understand some high-level data warehousing concepts when it comes to exam. Yeah. So without wasting any time, let's get it right. So yesterday, if you just a second. Okay. So yesterday, if you remember, we have created our data back Synapse, right? And we have gone through different modules or components, right? At least items within this. And when it comes to data, then you have workspace and linked. Within workspace, you have list of databases. But yesterday it was 0 because there were like no databases. So what I have done is I have gone to manage and I have created a new SQL pool. Okay, a dedicated new SQL pool. So once you create this, you have an option to pause it because it will be running in the backend and it will be charged for it. So it's very simple to create that. Click on new and then try to add these details and select the data warehouse units, how many you need, and then just that's it. Very straightforward. So that's what I've done because usually it takes some time. So I've already created one. So built in, it will be automatically created when you create your Synapse. Okay. And similarly, I've also created a Spark pool. It's again very straightforward. Click on this new and fill in all these details. Okay. So when it comes to node size family, you have, I think you only have memory optimized because it's in memory. And node size, you have different options here to select: small, medium, large, and all. So based on that, you're gonna get bill. And auto scale, if you enable this, then you have like minimum number of nodes, which is 3, maximum number of nodes 10. I think you can again configure this minimum and maximum. So based on the load and based on the performance, the system will automatically scale accordingly. Okay. If you don't need auto scale, just disable this and then give only the maximum number of nodes, because if you already know that my system load is going to be this much, and for that I need these many number of nodes so that my Spark in-memory computation can be performed on top of that. Because just watch out the cost, because based on the nodes the cost is going to be added. Okay, so I've already done that, right? I've already done that. So you have SQL pools, you have Spark pools, right? So if I go back to the data, so once you add them, those two items will be listed down. Okay, so when it comes to databases, right? When it comes to databases, so once you create them, like I said, in SQL pool, I have created an SQL pool, so it will create database for me. Once you launch that, it's nothing but a data warehouse, right? Again, watch out these symbols as well. So this symbol here, so the symbol here is for this symbol here is for SQL. The symbol here is for Spark. Okay, so just watch out that. And then within the SQL pool, again, it's similar to the normal SQL databases, like normal structured databases. You have tables, external tables, views, store procedures, schema, security, and everything. All the options you will have similar. And again, when it comes to Spark, you have only tables. We'll look into this, how we got this one, right? I'll show you how I've done that. So here, once you set up this entire thing, right? So let's say now you wanted to run some query. Okay. So what query we are going to run there is, I think I already have some queries which I've picked. Okay. Let me copy this one and let's try to create a new, sorry, not this one. Let's try to develop a new script. Okay. We are trying to do an SQL script. Okay. So you create on that new, I don't need this one. I need some space. Yeah. I'm pasting this code. Okay. So what this does is it will try to create a table which is stripped with all the columns. That's it. Very straightforward, nothing fancy. And the distribution type is round robin. We'll see why this distribution we have selected and what is the importance of it. And then the index is clustered column store index. And what is clustered column store index? What are the types we have and why we have to choose this one? We will see that as well. And that's it. So forget about this guy for now. Just forget about this guy. Just focus till here, till the semicolon. Okay, so if I wanted to run this, so usually what I can do is I can just, select this one and just click on run. And if I wanted to save this query, right? So what I can do is this is like, create statement, something like that. Create statement query, for instance. I can save this query. If you publish this query will be saved here. Okay, so if you wanted to reuse that, you can reuse it. Now the query I'm publishing and it's getting saved here. Okay, so now if I wanted to run this one, because I already ran this one and I have a table of trip, let's try to make it like trip 507, a unique name, another table. And let's try to run this and see if it gets created within the time. So here, important thing while running, just forget about all these other tabs. I'm just closing them so that you don't get any confusion. Yeah. So here, create statement query, right? So here I wanted to run the script. So against which SQL pool I'm going to run it? Because where I wanted to create this, because I have got Spark pool, I've got SQL pool, and again, built-in, serverless, built-in, both are same, and dedicated, right? So I've got a couple of options there. So which one to choose is here. Connect to. Okay, so you need to select which one. Under serverless, by default you have built-in. Okay, and within dedicated you have SQL pool. So if you're running a SQL query, you will get the list of SQL pools here. So you need to select that. Okay, if I select this dedicated SQL pool, it's going to run against that database. So select this guy and hit run. This should be quick. Yeah, query executed successfully. So let's go back to the data here under workspace. I think it's not refreshed yet. Refresh. It's getting refreshed. Databases, under SQL pool, under tables. Yeah, now you see trip 507. So this is the table which we have created. Okay, again, straightforward. I'm just showing you the options, how to create it, how to play around with the Synapse once you have these kind of things. So again, if you come to this one, then you can see different columns you have within this. Okay, so right now if I go here, right click, select top 100 rows, because it's an empty table, right? So you don't really see any data. We have just created the table. So now what I want is there is another query below this table. This is what I wanted to run now. So what I want to do is I just wanted to copy some data from this, from this URL, right? So this is like an open source data set. I just wanted to copy this data, put into the table which we have created. I think load into trip 507, right? So here I'm giving the file type CSV delimiter, because that's a form of the data, the file format, and all the different fields. I'm just giving the file format, and I just wanted to copy the data. So just let's try to run this one and see if it gives any error, something. Encountered empty schema. Oh, it's running. Okay. So this query performance, it completely depends on the DW units which we have selected for SQL pool. Okay. If you have more number of DW units, then this query execution will be faster. If you have less, then it will take time, because it has to make a query plan, and then again, the performance, all the number of memory computation, everything in the back, and it tries to calculate. That's the reason you see it is taking time, because usually this data is huge and it has to get the data, it has to format, and it has to load. So what we can do is oh, it was quick, 36 seconds, query executed, perfect. So we have the data. Now let's try to refresh. Let me close everything, close this guy, the job is done. Now let's try to refresh this database. Go to the table. We have two tables, right? Go to this table, right click, and here within this table, you have different operations which you can perform. Once you right click on this guy, right click, then you get different options. Once you go to SQL, it's like, SSMS, like, query editor. Then you click on select top 100 rows. Then it should give you top 100 rows. No, the data is not added. Zero data. Okay. Maybe something happened. Maybe some file format was wrong. Azure Data Studio, if you know by any chance. I'm not sure about Azure Data Studio. For Synapse, it has a different thing. It's like, Azure Synapse Studio, but maybe we can explore that option there, Chris. We can look into that. Okay, I think let's try to look into the data which I've already loaded. The system, I think it senses that we are doing some demo, and it doesn't really work whenever I do some demo, because when I do it on my free time before demo, it really works fine. But I think it senses that. It says that, I don't want to perform well here. I've already loaded some data here anyway. So let's try to look into this, right? I'm doing the same operation, select top 100. Yeah, so I think the same operation I've performed before and it loaded all the data. You see all the data in CSV format, again, like data frame, right? Data frame, spreadsheet, table, column. Okay, so here you have a couple of options. Here you can either export this data, right? In CSV, JSON, XML, you directly have this table data to export, or else you can view that in chart, like, in graphics. Okay, so you can select what kind of chart you need, and you can also visualize that, and you can also save this chart in the form of JPEG, PNG, right? In whichever form you need. So within this data, you wanted to just run something, right? For example, if I go to this one, right click, drop, let's do one thing. Let's try to remove this guy, and I'm adding another query. Okay, what I want is passenger, do some aggregation and everything and run. I'm not really sure if it runs quickly because it needs some computation. So now I'm doing some analysis on top of this data. Okay, so what the analysis is doing some aggregation, same from this table, adding some filter and where conditions and doing some group by and order by. I think the similar SQL operations which we do, especially when we are doing some analysis on the SQL data, right? So again, you see the data is again table format, you can export. And the thing what I wanted to show is here on the chart, right? Here you have like aggregation data, and then you can see the aggregation data for this was around 25, blah, 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 here 5, here 26, so on. Okay, you can also change the type. You can go for area, you can go for column. So if you wanted to do some analysis, right, visual analysis, because you have got like huge data and you cannot really read it in table format, then you kind of can use all these different options. I think it's a scatter plot between X and Y, and in X you have different dimensions again. But yeah, and you can save this image in different things, and you can also see the message here. So this is all about SQL pool. Okay, so you can run all your SQL queries within the SQL pool. So if you've got like a big list of SQL pools for different activities you've created, then you have to connect to that specific SQL pool and then try to run them. Okay. So let's close this one. So this is all about SQL pool. So now let's try to explore something else. So here, if I come here, and yesterday we've seen that we also have like, gallery for data sets, notebooks, SQL queries and everything, right? So you can browse the gallery. Once you click on the browse, you will have some data set where you can play around with so that you get some better understanding. So within this data set, I think I have already taken New York taxi, yellow taxi trip records. So if I click on this, continue. So again, you have a table data, which is again in a column row format. And again, this is a data, which is a real-time data. Okay. So if you want to add this data set, click on add. Anyway, I already have this data set, right? So if I go back, cancel. So once you click on add data set, that data set will be added automatically to your Azure Blob Storage. This Azure Blob Storage will be created on the flow. Okay. So if I come here under sample data sets, you have this New York taxi and New York yellow taxi data set. Okay. So here again, if you click on these options, you can do a couple of operations on top of this. You can run like, SQL script of top 100 rows. You can create external table. And when it comes to notebook, you can also load the data into data frame and create a Spark table. Let's try to analyze this with the notebook. Once you click on load to data frame, you'll get a query. Okay. So here, what we are trying to execute is we are trying to execute some Python or PySpark code. Okay. And we wanted to run this against Spark pool, which we have created. It's like a Spark job. So you need to attach, right? So here I've created Spark pool. If you have like a big list of Spark pools, then you can select which one you need. So for me, I have only one and it is medium. So the thing is based on this computation selection, right? Medium, small and large, your performance depends. So it is medium, so it might take some time. So here what we are trying to do is here we are trying to load that data, import the data, put it in data frame DF. We are trying to convert it into data frame and store the data frame in DF and display the data frame to limit 10. I think that's what we're trying to do here. So I've attached it and you can use the language and then just run this guy. Okay. Okay, it's going to take some time, I believe. Like I said, this performance completely depends on the options which you choose, like the cores and the memory, right? The memory option there, because for low, medium, high, double XL, you have different variations and combinations of vCores there. So it completely depends on that. So here, what I wanted to tell you is all the Spark operations you run against the Spark pool. Okay, all the SQL operations you run against SQL pool. Okay, so here you can also create a Spark. I'm not sure, it's taking time. Let's cancel this guy. But anyway, you're going to see the data frame, like, all the data. But again, now it's a data frame. It's not a data set. We are trying to convert this data set into data frame. And again, the difference between data set and data frame, it's very easy. So you have a data set and you are trying to load it into Spark and try to convert to data frame, because you can do data frame operations on top of that, right? So once you go to pandas and you have big list of functions, operations you can do on top of data frame once you have the data in data frame format. So that's what we are trying to do, convert it to data frame, then try to apply all those operations on top of it. So I think it's going to take some time, like I said, because this size might not be sufficient enough. It's already 1 minute, 19 seconds, you see. So it might take time. Okay, what we can do is we can just cancel this guy, okay, and go back to this. What I've done is, once you come to this one and click here in the notebook, new Spark table. Once you click on this new Spark table, right, it will automatically create a code for you. In the code, what it does is it will create a table for us under the Spark. Okay, so you can change the table name here. So once you execute the script, what happens is it will pick the data set, convert it to data frame, and then it will try to create a table and it will store it in this table, whatever the name you're going to mention. So you can execute this code. I've already done that. Okay, so if I go back, please wait. Okay, this is canceled now. If I go back, default Spark, okay, within this table, right, your table, you see, and you have all the data here. So here you can go to this guy, load to data frame, select top 100, right? So here, what I'm trying to do is, let's try to run this. Let's see. Okay, so here I have executed the data in the Spark table using SQL query. Try to understand the difference here. Okay, here you have two things: SQL pool, Spark pool. SQL is isolated, Spark is isolated. But here, the Spark table data I have executed using SQL query. So you also have, like, different variations once you create with something, and then you can also execute with something else. But if I try to connect this guy with SQL pool B, and let's see if this runs or not. Yeah, see, the thing why it did not run for SQL pool B, because this is a dedicated database and you have data for SQL pool B in this database. And whatever the data which lies in this database, you can only run that data against that pool. Okay. And this data lies in a different database, which is Spark database. So you're not able to connect to the SQL pool B and trigger the SQL query, even though it is a SQL query, but it's not supporting because this data is not mapped to this data warehouse, this SQL pool. Okay. But for this, you can use serverless. Serverless is nothing but it's like, it's a distributed compute, which is common for both Spark and also for SQL. So that's the reason if you connect to built-in, by default, built-in, it will act for both Spark and SQL, and it will run your query. But for SQL pool, it doesn't run. Okay, so it gives you an error because it doesn't, the table doesn't exist or supported for this version. So if I try to run with built-in, so why I'm trying to stretch this is because we are going to see some questions as well in the today's session, and you might get these kind of questions when it comes to exam. So just watch out on these kind of differences. Okay. So I think more or less these are the major things you need to know when it comes to Synapse, right? At least in this level, even for your work as well. So you need to understand the difference between pools, Sparks, code, and SQL queries, how you can publish them, save them. You can validate them, of course, and then you have integration, that's ADF, monitor, and manage is common. I think these are the extra options you've got here. So quickly moving back to my this one, PPT. So that is what I wanted to show you guys. But today we will be discussing on these topics, especially the reason why I highlighted these topics is because these are really important when it comes to exam. MPP, what is MPP? We're going to see storage and data distribution types, data types and table types. Table types are important, data distribution types are important. Partition and distribution, you need to understand. and dimensional modeling. This is really important. We'll see one by one what is it. So like I said, MPP, Azure Synapse works on top of MPP architecture. So what is MPP? It's a massive parallel processing, or massively parallel processing engine. Okay, so like I told, you have a control node, you have a compute node, you have a manager, you have a developer. Okay, so usually all the data, all the requests will go to control node, and control node will facilitate and orchestrate which compute node I need to send that request to, and based on that it will execute that query, either SQL query or a Spark job or a Spark code, okay, or a Python code. It can be anything. Okay, and here you have another service called DMS, data movement service, between each and every node. So you have DMS between control node to the entire cluster, if you want to call it as a cluster, and you also have DMS service within the clusters as well. And on bottom you have Azure storage, to store all the meta information, all the external linked service or linked data, all the data set and everything. So here, like I said, DWUs are very important. Okay, let's say you have provisioned 100 DWUs, and loading 3 tables might take 15 minutes, and running a report might take 20. So if you wanted to improve the performance time, the loading time and the reporting time, then you need to increase the DWUs. If you increase the DWUs from 100 to 500, it might reduce to 3 minutes, it might reduce to 4 minutes. You see, you have a huge difference. Like I said, the performance completely depends on the DWUs, and the cost is also directly proportional to the DWUs. If you have more DWUs, you have more cost. But in a very high level here, the one thing you need to, because you won't really get any questions on this, you don't really need to understand the internal micro architecture, how it is connecting, where it executes, because you don't really need to work on that, because here you're not trying to optimize or improve the performance. Because usually what we do is we'll try to analyze our existing architecture when it comes to on-premise, so that we will try to find the bottlenecks where you have the major time consumption, right? For example, if I'm running a query, what we'll try to do, if you wanted to optimize a query, or if you wanted to improve the query performance, or if you wanted to improve the entire data retrieval performance, then you'll try to understand the end-to-end architecture, and then try to do some research on top of that, and try to find out, okay, so here you have network latency, here you have some IO operation, so we need to optimize this. This is the place it's taking more time. But when it comes to MPP or cloud or Azure Synapse, you don't have to worry about that, because if the performance is low, you know why it is low. It's low because DW units are less. If you want more, then you need to increase this. That's all. You can't really optimize anything on this. You can't do much optimization or enhancement on this architecture, because this is completely handled, controlled, maintained, owned by Microsoft Azure. Moving forward, you have Azure storage and distribution. Okay, so when it comes to SQL data warehouse, like I said, SQL data warehouse is a small part of Azure Synapse, right? Because a part of data warehouse, there are other things as well Synapse supports. So again, here the charge is completely separate. Charges separately for storage consumption. Okay, for storing it is different. For running the queries, it is different. You need to make sure that even though you pause the SQL data warehouse or Spark jobs or Synapse SQL pools, even though if you pause that, you have an option to pause, but still you will be charged for the data which you've already stored. Let's say you've already added some historical data, you have already stored it. For that, you will still be getting monthly bill, or yearly bill, or whatever the subscription you have with them. Okay, so there are two different types of costs. Yeah, that is very important to understand. So here you need to understand the distribution type. I think we will need to spend some time there, guys. Trust me, you are going to get 3 to 4 questions on distribution, no doubt there. So you're going to get like case studies and scenario based things, but you're going to get questions there. Just try to focus here, or memorize or by heart what I'm trying to say. This will really help you to crack the exam. So here a distribution is a basic unit of storage and processing for parallel queries. Okay, we're going to see that. So one important thing when it comes to Synapse is, like, by default, Synapse does 60 distributions. By default, it has 60 distributions for each node. Okay, so when you're trying to run a query, right, when you're trying to run some data, when you're trying to insert some data, so by default, you don't have to manually specify the distribution. By default, within that node, it already creates 60 logical distributions. That's the architecture they have designed. So the 60 number, I don't really know how this came up, but they say that they already have internally 60 distributions. The data gets distributed so that you have 60 parallel concurrent processing jobs which will be running in the backend. Once you execute something, it won't run in one logical partition, it will run under 60 logical partition. Okay, let's say you have a data, you have a data set, and the data set consists of 60 rows, and you are trying to insert the data in Synapse, for instance, okay, in SQL pool database or table. Then each row will be distributed to a logical partition. Okay, you have 60, then it will be distributed to 60. What if you have only 30? It will be distributed to only 30 then. But there you're not really utilizing the full features of Azure Synapse, the default feature of 60 distribution. So again, here we are talking about data warehouse analysis purpose, so historical data. So we assume that you have more than 60 records. We assume that you have big data, right? So each compute node manages one or more 60 of the distributions. Again, these distributions will be internally distributed. We don't know how it gets distributed. Okay, you have different compute nodes there, right? So either one node will have entire 60 distribution, or this entire 60 distribution can be spread across different compute nodes. One thing to remember here is it will be distributed under 60. That's the important thing here. And again, when it comes to distribution, sharding, partitioning, you have three main types: hash, round robin, replicated. We'll see that. So what is replicated tables, right? I think before going to replicated tables, one important thing we need to understand here is facts and dimensions. I'm not really sure if you guys are from that background. I'll just quickly give you a high level introduction on what is fact and what is dimension. I'm not sure if you're able to see this, but okay. For instance, I have a database here. I think this is a sample database which we have from Microsoft, right? AdventureWorks. So here, if you see, there is a thing. Okay. Here, if you see, you have dim table names and you have fact table names. Okay. So dimensions are nothing but all the contextual information you will have in the dimensions. Okay. Fact is nothing but all the measure data you will have in the fact. For example, all the customer details, right? So customer details are dimensions. So why customer details are dimensions? Because customer details won't be updated regularly, right? For example, you have your e-commerce system, right? And for example, new customer has joined, right? And that data remains there because customer name is not going to change every time, right? So the name remains there. What is going to change is transactions, order, right? Customer order. The order is going to store in fact table because order is a measure, like, customer A, for instance, here you have a customer Eric. So then this Eric, you will try to understand, okay, this is Eric, and you will try to go and check in the orders table, fact orders table, that how many orders Eric has made on August 27. Okay. So if you wanted to know that kind of information, what you do is you come to dimension customer, you find Eric, then you try to join this dimension customer with fact customer with some unique key. There will be some joining key, and then you will add in where condition where date is equal to August 27. Okay. So here, important aspect as a key takeaway from this is the differentiation between dimensions and facts. Okay. All the contextual information will remain in dimension, like date, customer details. For example, currency will not change, right? Once you add like, INR remains there, right? India is not going to change their currency. So this is like a contextual information, which will really help you. For example, in the facts, you have orders, right? In the orders, you will see the profits. So there in the profits, you see only the numbers. Once you wanted to join that numbers with the currency, then you have to add where condition country. So based on the country, you wanted to know the currency as well. So then you have numbers, currency, country, currency, all this kind of information is dimension. Okay. All the measure and facts, all the numbers are facts. Just try to remember that, because this is really important when it comes to data warehouse. Okay. And you have two different schemas, star schema and snowflake schema. So star schema is nothing but you will have a fact table, and the fact table will be surrounded with different dimensions. I should have created a slide for that, but unfortunately I don't have. So usually fact is nothing but, let's say you have a fact of finance. Okay. So this finance, for which customer we are talking this finance information. or for example, internet sales. Okay. So here fact internet sales. So this is a table. Okay. So if I wanted to know for which customer internet sales we are talking, then you need to connect this fact table with customer dimension. So if I wanted to know for which date we are talking of this internet sales, then you have to connect this fact table with date dimension. So if you're talking about country and currency for the sales, then you have to connect. So you put fact in middle, then try to connect with the unique key, like, the common key, the foreign and the primary key between fact and the dimension, and you make that star schema. That is called star schema. So Snowflake is nothing but then you again normalize that data, dimension data. For example, if you have like a date, which is like year, month, and date, then you wanted to normalize again from year till month, then you make two different tables. One table you have only year, the other table you have month. But here you don't need to go too deep into Snowflake or something. Just try to understand what is star, what is Snowflake. That's it. If you don't understand, you can just you can find it in the internet. That's pretty straight, but it's a very old concept. Okay, so this is about dimension and fact. Okay, so now the reason why I had to introduce these two important concepts is because we are talking about distribution techniques there, and those distribution techniques completely depend on the dimension and fact. And we'll also be discussing about dimensioning model as well. So dimensional modeling. Okay, so again, another thing here to notice is, because we are trying to understand the difference between fact and dimension here, right? For example, currency. So if you compare with dimension currency table with fact internet sales table, so in which table we are going to have huge data? It's obvious, right? In the fact table, we'll have more data, because currency, if you try to list down the list of countries, maybe 50 or 60 or 100 countries, okay, then you'll have 100 or like 80 different currencies. So you have only 80 records. Let me try to list down this guy. 1,000 rows. Just want to see how many records we have. See, you have only 105 rows. Not really sure if you're able to see it. So you have only 105 rows. So for different country, you have different currency. Okay, this is a dimension data. So if I try to list down the internet sales, okay, I'm just selecting the top 1,000, you'll have more data, because this is like a transaction data, right? So whenever there is a sale, it's going to add the data. So one thing is very clear, that dimension tables will have less data and fact tables will have more data, because dimension table data is static. It won't really change that frequently. But yes, sometimes it might change. For instance, customer wants to change his name, or maybe customer wants to change his address. Maybe he relocated from one location to other location. Customer wants to update his credit card details or his email ID. Even though that is a dimension data, even though that is a static information, he wants to update it. So now and then those data will also change. That is where we'll be talking about SCD type 1, type 2, type 3, slowly changing dimensions. We'll talk that. That is also important when it comes to exam. Okay, so here just try to focus on what is fact and what is dimension, and where do you have more data. In fact, we have more data, and in dimension, we'll have less data. So here, if I wanted to know the internet sales for a customer or for a currency, for instance, let's talk about currency and customer. Okay, currency and sales. So here we are talking about sales from the fact and currency from the dimension. If I wanted to know the sales of currency INR, what I have to do? I have to select sales from this table. Okay, join with currency table. I need to find the unique key between these two. Where condition, I need to add currency India, INR. Where currency is equal to INR, I need to do. So here what we are trying to do is we are trying to apply a join operation, right? We are trying to apply a join operation. So here the data from dimension, the data from fact has to join internally, and then it has to display the data to me. So there you are applying a join operation. Again, join operations, union operations, grouping, order by operations. Sometimes these can be very costly operations when it comes to performance, because here you have dimensions, different dimensions. Again, with the currency, you also wanted to know the customer name. Also, you wanted to know the date, for which date. So one fact table, you are trying to join with different dimensions, right? So here you are applying a join operation. So important aspects, I'm just trying to repeat it again. Fact table will have more data, dimension will have less data. And using dimension and primary keys and foreign keys, we are going to join the data to display the data, because all the contextual information lies in dimension. Let's go back to my slide. So here, when it comes to distribution, right, you have three types of distribution. One is replicated distribution or replication distribution. The other one is round robin distribution. The third one is hash distribution. Okay, so what is replication table or replication distribution? So replication distribution is nothing but, like I said, we are talking about MPP architecture, right? So you have a compute, you have like, compute node or control node, sorry, the parent node, and then you have a worker node where the actual work gets executed. Okay, so here when you try to insert the data, right? If you remember in the example which we have seen, let me go back to this guy again. So here, if you remember the query which I've executed to insert the data, develop, I think create statement query. Yeah, here if you see what I've done is I've tried to create the table, and while creating the table, I have given the distribution as a round robin. Okay, this is one type of distribution, but we will discuss what is round robin. But what I'm trying to say here is while creating the table, you have added your distribution type. So why we had to add distribution type as round robin here, we will see that. But first try to understand different types of distribution. But usually you do this distribution addition while creating table. Okay, and also index as well. Here index we have added as clustered column store index. So what are we talking here? We are talking about replication distribution or replication sharding pattern. Okay, so here what you do is while creating the table, you will add distribution is equal to replicate. So replication or distribution, what it does is, like I said, you have different compute nodes. You have a control node, then you have compute nodes. So when you are trying to insert the dimension data, or when you're trying to insert the fact data, what it does is it will try to replicate the data in different compute nodes. Okay, very carefully try to understand this. It will try to replicate the same data in compute node 1, same data in 2, same data in 3, same data in 4. So here we are replicating the data in different compute nodes. Okay, so if you're replicating the same data in different compute nodes, you are increasing the storage cost there because you're storing more data in different compute nodes, right? Again, based on the storage, you're going to get the bill, right? So now the question is, for which type of table, for dimension or fact, we can use replicated distribution? Which table has less data? Obviously, it's a dimension table, right? Obviously, it's a dimension type. So for dimension type, what happens is it will have less data, right? So then what we can do is we can use a replication technique for distribution when it comes to dimension data. Even though if it gets replicated to different compute nodes, the bill will be literally less because we are talking about 105 records. It's not big. It's not big deal. But why do we need to do that, right? While discussing the dimension and facts, I also mentioned that we'll be doing joining operations if you wanted to get a contextual information. Let's say you have some fact data in this node. Okay, then you have your dimension data in this node. Forget about this replication. Let's say you have your dimension data in this node, fact data in this node. When you're doing a join operation, the data has to come, the query has to go to this node, collect the data, come here, and then display to you. What if the dimension data and the fact data both are in same compute node when you're doing a join? So you don't have the DMS, right? Data movement service doesn't really have to work here, and the performance will be really good. Yeah, you're with me? So that's the reason what we do here is for the replication type, right? For the dimension data where you have less data, there are some dimension scenarios where you'll have more data. In that case, you shouldn't use replication type. Wherever the dimension table you anticipate, oh, for this dimension table, the data is less, I'll go for the replication technique. So in that case, it will replicate the data in all the nodes. And if your fact table lies in this compute node, because for fact table, we are not doing replication. So fact table can lie in any one of this compute node. So maybe your fact table is in this node. Your dimension is also anyway replicated here because it's there in all the node. Then when you're doing a join condition between these two guys, the execution and the query performance will be really fast because the data retrieval will be fast and you don't have a DMS movement between the nodes because again, that's a costly operation. So in a very nutshell, this is about replication. So what are we talking here? So this is round robin. I think these tables are persisted on nodes even after we pause. Correct. The tables, the data will still be there. Once you pause the SQL pool, the query will be discarded. You're going to cancel the query execution. That's it. Okay. So the data, the tables, everything will still persist on the node, because when I say table, when I say data, that all comes under storage, right? So it will be charged as a storage cost. But when you're executing an SQL query, and if you pause and there is some query which is running in the backend, that will ask you that, there is a query which is running in the backend. You still want to pause the execution? If you say no, that query continues. If you say yes, then the query gets disconnected and then the query will be discarded. It won't get executed. Moving forward, round robin tables, round robin technique. Again, here, once creating the table, you under the distribution type, you need to mention round robin. Okay, so round robin is nothing but, I think this part was already explained in a very high level by Vishwamitra when he was explaining about data factory. I'll try to put it again in simple terms here. So round robin is nothing but, it's actually an algorithm. Round robin is an algorithm. What it does is, let's say you have compute node 1, compute node 2. Let's assume that you have only 2 compute nodes. So when you're trying to insert the data, right? When you're trying to insert the data, evenly it tries to send record 1 to this, record 2, record 3, record 4, record 5, record 6. So it evenly tries to distribute the data to these 2 compute nodes. Okay, so when you're trying to insert the data, round robin will distribute the data, some data for compute node, some data to compute node 2. So generally used to load the data, distribute data evenly across the table without additional optimization. So that's what I was talking about. So if you have like 4 nodes, 1, 2, 3, 4, then when the data is coming from the input system, 1 will go here, 2 will go here, 3 will go here, 4 will go here. 4 records I'm talking. 1 record, row, second row, third row, fourth row, fifth row, sixth row, seventh, eighth. So it will evenly distribute the data within those compute nodes. Okay, and here, and where this is used, because here I don't want to like replicate the data, because here the data is large and I just wanted to load the data. Because here what I'm trying to say is, so if you have like 4 different compute nodes, okay, just try to visualize what I'm saying. You have 4 different compute nodes and you have some data in one node, the other one is here and the other one is here. When you're trying to do some join operations, right, and we don't know, for example, if I'm trying like where condition, where is equal to INR, I want all the fact data where the currency is equal to INR. So some fact data will be in this node, INR fact data, and some other fact sales will be here. Some data will be here, some data will be here. When I'm doing that join, it has to go to all these compute nodes. It has to fetch all the data based on the join condition, and then it has to display to me in the screen, or it has to retrieve the data. So that is what here. Joins are slow because it requires to reshuffle the data, because the data has to reshuffle between these all compute nodes. Here we are only talking about 4. But when it comes to MPP and when it comes to Synapse, you might have like n number of compute nodes, and we don't really know and how many compute nodes it's going to store the data in the backend. So here, loading data is fast, because while loading data, I'm not adding any intelligence there. I'm closing my eyes and just throwing one record here, the other one here, the other one here, the other one here. I'm just like throwing and dumping the data. So whenever you need a high loading performance, you will use round robin. So the best use case for that is staging tables. So that is the reason this is mainly used for staging tables. So usually you have source, then you have destination. Between source and destination, what you do is you create a staging schema. Okay, within this, what you do is you load the data from source to staging, then you use round robin. You don't really have to worry about this, right? Then use round robin and all the data is loaded here. Then again, from here to destination, you use another technique. Either you use replication technique if the dimension data is less, or else you use hash technique, which we are going to see in the next slide. That is really important. Okay, so round robin is mainly used for loading the data, but querying the data, it is not good, because reshuffling has to happen and the performance is not good in terms of query. But in terms of load, round robin is good. So whenever in the question you get that the data has to be loaded to staging, which distribution technique will you use? The answer is round robin. And you have data which is less than 200 MB or 2 MB, and it is a dimension table, and you need to use a distribution technique. Which option you will choose? Within the given option, choose replication. And let's talk about hash. We've managed for dimensions with less data with replication. We have managed for staging to just load the data using round robin. But what about the fact tables which has more data? Because like I said, when I was explaining about dimensions and facts, for fact, you will have more data, right? For fact, you will have more data. So in that case, you will use hash distribution. So hash distribution is nothing but, if you know the fact table and if you know the unique key within the fact table, then you use hash distribution and you will put that column within that hash distribution. For round robin and replication, you don't have to mention the column name, But when it comes to hash, you need to mention the column name. You need to mention that. You remember we had to mention this column name when it comes to partition for NoSQL database. Similarly, you also have to mention the column name. If you think that you're going to filter mainly based on the product category, then use product category in the hash, so that the data will be distributed based on the product category. Okay, so for example, category 1 will be loaded in compute node 1, category 2 will be loaded in 2, category 3 here, category 4 here. Whenever you're using where category 1, then it will only try to go to compute node to fetch the data. It doesn't have to reshuffle it. Okay, so for the question is like, when you have fact table with the huge data, which type of distribution technique you're going to use? Hash. And within that, there will be a SQL, there will be like a create table query, and there will be different column names. They will also ask you that on which column you're going to use hash. That is where you need to use your expertise and tell that, okay, this is like unique, maybe I have to do filter condition on top of this, I'll use this. I think we'll have an example to see on that, don't worry. So here an example is like, I think here the hash distribution was done on product, right? On product, because product is unique. Don't get confused within this unique and the uniqueness which we spoke on SQL, NoSQL. Okay, so here if you put a hash on product, soccer category will be in one compute node and the football category will be in the other compute node. So whenever you put where soccer, it will go to this compute node and it will try to fetch the data. Okay, so hash distributions are mainly used for fact tables with huge data. So now we know 3 different kinds of distributions. I think usually, yeah, you put it like this: distribution hash, and then within the parenthesis, you mention the column name. Here, profit and loss, I think P and L. Okay, so mainly this. And one other thing is, while choosing the hash distribution, you should be very careful. Again, you shouldn't make like what do you say, that a mistake of choosing a partition and where you have all the data. I think this is not actually part of distribution. I think this is part of partitioning. Okay, we'll talk about data skewing thing. But yes, so I think I don't really have anything else on this distribution. I think we have only these guys. But yeah, I think in terms of distribution, understanding these 3 different types is really important. I think we've got another option, which is partition. I think partitions we've already discussed on partition. So don't get confused between distribution and partition. Okay, in terms of SQL database, right? So partition is different. So in partition, what happens is you will add partitions in tables. For example, like, month, year can be a partition which you are adding to the table. So all the data related to January 2020 will be stored in one table. All the data related to February 2020 will be stored in other table. So here the thing what we are trying to understand is you shouldn't choose a partition where you have all the data in one compute node and the other compute nodes you don't have data. So while choosing the partition as well, you need to be very careful that at least you need to anticipate that, okay, so if I choose partition like this, then the data will be evenly distributed. I think this concept is similar to what we have seen when it comes to hot partitions for NoSQL, right? While choosing the partition, if you don't really choose the proper partition key, then it will be a hot partition and all the data lies in one thing, and that's like a data skew, and the remaining logical partitions will be empty and all the performance and load will be impacting only on one logical partition, and which is not good. So you should try to manage as much as possible with even distribution and even partition. Okay, like I said, data warehouse uses up to 60 distributions when loading data into the system. By default, it anyway has 60 distributions. On top of that, you are adding our distribution, which is like either hash, replication, or round robin distribution. On top of that, we are adding. So here, distribution key is nothing but it determines a method where it spreads the data across multiple nodes. That's what we are trying to do here, right? We wanted to spread the data in multiple nodes so that we can use that parallel processing. At the same time, while retrieving the data, we don't want it to, cause any performance issues, because, all the joining, reshuffling, ordering, grouping by, that will cost costly performance. Even though you're doing parallel processing there, but if all the data has to come to one node, right? It has to reshuffle the data and bring all the data in cache in one node so that you can see that consolidated data while doing that queries. So you need to watch out for that, especially when it comes to distribution key. At least this is for hash. So good hash key, it distributes evenly, used for grouping. So these are like good attributes. Used as join condition, is not updated, right? And more than 60 distinct values. Like I said, I think by default your data will have more than 60 rows. If it is less than 60 rows, I don't really think you will use SQL data warehouse, right? Again, when to use what? A replication for small dimensions, less than 2 GB. Okay, use replication, round robin, staging and loading data, then use round robin, hash, use for facts, and again for large dimension tables. I don't really think you'll have large dimension tables, but in your use case, if you have large dimension tables, then you go for hash. I think with respect to the SQL data warehouse, especially Azure Synapse, these three important topics are really important. Okay, so there are other types when it comes to creating data types and table types, right? So you need to watch out for other thing, which is like, you know, if you are storing only int, use int as a data type. Okay, if you're storing only varchar, use varchar. Don't use nvarchar. I know nvarchar also supports that, but by doing this, what you're doing is like, you know, you are occupying more space there. I think these are some best practices while defining or designing a data warehouse. I don't really think we need to go through this, but you know, try to use what data type is needed for your table design. That's what we are trying to say here. And yeah, I think right now we don't have this XML, geography. These kind of data types are not supported yet in the data warehouse. I think so, yeah. And table types. So this is again important topic, right? You might get questions on this. So you have, by default, you have three different types. One is clustered column store, heap, and clustered index. Okay. So whenever you try to create a table, by default, it gets created with clustered column store, because this is what it gets created by default. So Azure Synapse will also recommend to create with clustered column store, and by default, if you don't mention anything, it will be created with this. Okay, so this is nothing but the indexes will be done on the columns and all the columns. Okay, I'm not going to go deep into what is index and all. Just try to understand that if you have like 10 columns, the indexes will be done on all of the 10 columns. Okay, so, and the second type is heap. Like I said in the question, if you get like, you know, three options and which one should you pick clustered column store, because this is what Azure recommends, this is what Synapse recommends, this is default for Synapse and recommended approach. Okay, so in the option, whenever you get these index types, always you will have to choose this. I don't really see there is an option or there will be a need to choose other tools, but you need to understand the difference between clustered. I will explain about 1 million rows per node. Yeah, I will look into that. I'll explain that. I think we have that thing, 1 million segment rows. 1 million segment rows. We have that when it comes to partition. I think I have an example for that. Okay, so here, like I said, by default, clustered column store. Okay, the second option is heap. So what is heap? Heap is nothing but no index. Okay, again, this is used to load the data, because you know, when you're trying to load the data, if you have some indexes, then there is some intelligence, then there is a zookeeper, then there is a guy like an index guy, and he's saying that, okay, you are coming and getting stored into this place. So before getting stored there, I wanted to assign you a number, I wanted to give an index number, wait, hold. So the loading time might take more there. But if you don't have any index there, so it is just simply dumping the data. It is just like, you know, throwing all the data. So you don't have any index. So when it comes to heap, if you don't have any index, then you go for heap type. Okay. So usually if you try to compare this with distribution, I think replication data can be used with heap, because when you wanted to load the data, right, for staging tables, you don't really need an index there. Index is again used for querying the data, not for loading the data, right? But while loading the data, you need to make sure that you have proper indexes so that you will be able to query the data faster. Okay, just don't get confused with all the words and terminologies, what I'm trying to say here. There are two important things: load the data, query the data. Loading the data is nothing but you are dumping the data. You are loading the data to the table or to the database. Querying the data is nothing but you already have the data in the table or the database. Now you're trying to query the data. So while querying, there can be joining operations you wanted to do, and there is a data like a big table data, and now you wanted to query based on your where condition. Maybe the data lies somewhere in the bottom. Now your query has to run to that entire table. It has to scan that entire table. So while scanning that entire table, it will take time, right? If you have indexes, then it will go and straight hit to the point. Okay. So when it comes to heap, no index, but loading will be faster, because here we are not applying any index before loading to the data. So this is kind of similar to replication techniques which we have seen. Remember one important thing: clustered column store. Just take a picture from your eyes and capture this in your brain. And the other one is clustered index. I think clustered index is like, the legacy index which we have in on-premise SQL databases. Usually what we do is in the cluster index, you will define a column name, like, add cluster index on the column. So this is kind of similar to hash technique, which we have seen. So for example, if you feel that most of the time I'll be adding a product category in my where condition, so I wanted to index only that column. So then you use clustered index. So mainly this is like, index, which is done for on-premise method. You can specify the column name. So mainly we have like these three types. There is one more type, non-clustered index, but we don't really have to understand that. But just try to memorize this, right? No, I don't want to like, give you more deep technical things, but these topics are really important when it comes to exam. That's the reason I had to add them here, or else you don't have to worry about these guys. And these are like, one-time activities you do when you create a table, when you create a database. These are not like a recurring activities. But when it comes to data factory, you have to design and enhance against each and every sprint. But these things, you do it only for the first time when you're migrating or starting a project from scratch. But understanding these can be handy and really important. Again, here, for example, table partition, okay. Again, like I said, right, before I was talking about partitioning, so I was actually talking about table partitioning. Maybe I got confused between distribution and partitioning. There we are talking about distribution, and you should be very careful about data skew, and even you have to distribute the data. Again, when it comes to partitioning, you have table partitioning. Okay, so again, even for table partitioning, you need to watch out and use a key, right, partition on a column, again, which can evenly distribute the data. So here again, table partition enable you to divide your data into smaller groups. So what we are trying to do here is, instead of dumping all the data in one table, we are trying to distribute the data evenly without skewing, without hot partitions to different compute nodes, to leverage the parallel processing of Azure Synapse or Azure SQL data warehouse. At the end, that is what we are trying with the partition. That is what we are trying with distribution. That is what we are trying with index, right? Again, to improve the query performance, right? So just try to understand what we are trying to do here. So this will improve the efficiency and performance. Mainly, right, like I said, data will be partitioned on date column. I mean, usually most of the use cases out there, when it comes to table partitioning, they do it on date column. So that, for January, all the data will be on January table, and for February, all the data will be February table. So the data will be like stored based on this partition. It used to improve the query performance. Query and load, two different things. Yeah, I think same things. Okay, best practices. What here they are trying to say is, creating a table too many partitions can also hurt the performance. So like I said, don't create too many partitions and don't create less partitions. So you need to watch out on that. But again, these list is important when it comes to implementation. So like, they say 10 or few is more than enough if you wanted to do like, successful partitioning. Sorry, 10 or few hundred. So at least start from 10 and then go for 100, but usually not less than 10. It will be like very less partitions again. Clustered column store tables, it is important to consider how many rows belong to each partition. Okay, so I think this is where Chris was asking a question that, so we have like, for each partition and for each distribution partition, we have a limit there. It's like 1 million rows, 1 million segment rows. So for 1 million segment rows, it will create that complete package. So we need to anticipate, if you're trying to create, okay, where is this? We need to anticipate that if it reaches above 1 million rows or not. Okay, that is one thing. I think I have a slide where it explains that. Let's see if we get that right. Okay, before partitions are created, anyway, like I told, by default, you will have anyway 60 distribution data, 60 distributions by default anyway. So let's say you have a use case where you wanted to create a partition, but you're not getting a partition because you feel that we don't need partition. Don't worry, anyway, you'll have like a 60 distributions by default from Azure SQL data warehouse. Okay, so yeah, I think this is the example which I wanted to tell. So let's say you have 60 distributions, which we mentioned, because this is by default, and you have created partitions on day. Okay, year, month, week, day, right? So here we are trying to create partitions. So total we have like 365 days. And then for that particular year, for that table, you will have, or for that table, yeah, for that table, you'll have 365 partitions. So the whole table will be distributed or divided into 365. Like I said, by default, you have 60, and again 365. If you multiply, then you have like 21,900 data buckets. So when you query something, the query has to go through this 21,900 data buckets and fetch the data for you. Okay, if you're putting a where condition like date or day there. Okay. So like I said, again, 21,900 data bucket, the ideal segment size of a data warehouse in Synapse, the ideal segment size is 1 million rows. Okay. So then if you try to multiply this guy with this guy, then you'll have these many rows. So we need to really watch out, because do not ever create partition on 365 on day, right? So you can go till month and week, but you cannot go till day. For me, this ideal segment size is a little bit confusing still. Maybe I need to look into this guy. For me, when I tried to look into this ideal segment size, I couldn't really understand what they meant by it. But maybe I can share you some links from Microsoft once I go through them so that you get better understanding. But you need to understand that we have a segment size recommended from Synapse, that 1 million rows. I mean, this will be applicable for indexing. This will be applicable for distributions as well. Okay. So what they are trying to say here is, maybe that's my understanding, whatever the distribution or partition you are creating, make sure that you have only 1 million rows in that. If it exceeds, if it exceeds more than 1 million, again, you'll have performance issues. So try to accommodate that distribution or the table, like I said, even distribution, limit to 1 million rows. That's like an ideal segment. You can have more than that, but again, it will have a performance issue. But more information on this, I'll try to share with you guys with a link. But this is an example. If you wanted to do some multiplications on partitions, distributions, and data buckets, and segment size. I think you might get a question like, the ideal segment, what is ideal segment? Maybe 1 million rows. I haven't seen this question, but just, remembering this is worth. Okay, how do we apply these principles to a dimensional model? I think for fact tables, like we discussed, the distribution technique is always hash key, right? And the large ones are better as a column store. So like I told you, the index should always be column store clustered index. Okay. So partition only if the table size is enough to fill up each segment. So like I told you, each segment has 1 million rows. So try to accommodate if you see that it gets really 1 million rows. But here the index should be column store clustered, and the distribution should be hash key when it comes to fact tables. That is important. And for dimension, it can be hash if it is large, or round robin if there is no. For round robin, right, only for staging or loading you can use round robin. Again, column store index, right? And for large dimensions, column store. For small, again, these are like the best practices they are giving. Okay. Heap or clustered index for small dimensions, because heap is like no index, clustered is index on a specific column. Whenever you feel you have small dimensions, you can go with this. And then partitioning is not recommended on this. So you can also have secondary indexes if you wanted to, if you feel that, primary index on this specific column. I also wanted another column where I wanted to add secondary index on that column for joins and all. You can also leverage that for dimensions. But for me, like I said in the previous slides, don't get confused with this when it comes to exam. Dimensions, replication, facts, hash, staging, round robin, period. Okay, so there is one other important concept when it comes to workload management. So workload management, you just need to understand theoretically what it is. I mean, this is really important. Workload management is nothing but, I think you have this feature. I also think you also have this feature on-premise SQL Server database. Workload management ensures that enough resources exist for data warehouse activities, loading, transforming, querying. Let me give you a scenario. Okay, so let's say you and some higher level manager from your organization, let's say you as a developer, and you're working with your CEO. Okay, and you both connected to a specific database, right? And CEO wants to see the quarterly results. So he is trying to query, he ran some query and he written some query and he ran that query. Usually CEOs, they don't do it. I mean, their assistants do it, but I'm just giving you an example. So here CEO is running a query. At the same time, you being as a developer, you're also running a query. Maybe you're doing some testing, you're doing some development, you're running a query. So here you both ran the query at the same time. So which query should get the precedence? Who should get the importance? Who should get the priority? Obviously it's CEO, right? I mean, CEO can't wait there. I understand. I mean, here I'm not not being racist or something. What I'm trying to say here is, of course, here the important message what I'm going to say here is, so based on the priority, you wanted to allocate the resources, you wanted to allocate the importance for the query execution. Here, if you try to compare the query with the workload, here we are trying to manage the workload. If CEO is trying to run a query, if CEO is trying to run this workload, then high importance should be given to CEO, because that is really important, because he wants to share those quarterly performance results, and that data lies in the same database where you are running the query. So here, when you both run the query at the same time, your query should halt and his query should get high importance or high priority. So that option you have when it comes to workload management in Azure Synapse or SQL Data Warehouse in cloud. So when it comes to workload management, you have three different types. One is workload classification, importance, isolation. I think workload importance itself says that which query should get more importance. And workload isolation, in workload isolation, you will allocate the resources for that group. Let's say you have created a user group, okay, developer user group and higher management user group. And for developer user group, you are giving less resources. For higher management user group, you are giving more resources. So whenever they run their query, they will have all the resources to execute the query. When I say resources, I'm talking about DWs. When I say resources, I'm talking about streaming units, DI units. So these kind of things. So you can also map them. You can also attach them for resource groups as well. So that part you do in workload isolation. Importance you give on this guy, and classification you do on this guy. So here workload classification, assign users to a role that has a corresponding resource class. So you will define a resource class here. So usually you have a SQL query to create workload classifier. If you go to Microsoft Docs, you can get that query. It's very straightforward. Copy the query, replace the name of the table and all, then execute it, right? So a classification that is based on database user will take the precedence over the role membership. So based on the classification which you define there, because there will be like different types. I think we'll see that in the next slide. So based on that, the priority and the precedence will be given. So when it comes to workload management, right, just try to understand what I said, like, the comparison between a developer and the CEO, which query has to execute first. To do that, you will create roles, groups, and you assign the importance to the groups. You assign the resource allocation to those groups to execute that query. Okay. Again, workload importance. Importance influences the order in which the request gets access to resources. So if you both are running the query, so the order will be changed, because the first order will be given to CEO and the next to you. 5 level of importance: low, below normal, normal, above normal, and high. For example, if I give high importance to CEO and below normal importance to you, then this will be taken with high priority, and after this gets executed, then your query will execute. Okay, so a request with higher importance will run before a request with lower importance. We know this. Workload isolation is nothing but reserves resources for a workload group. So like I said, you're creating a workload group with users, and then use workload groups to define the isolation. Then you reserve those resources. When I say resources, CPU, memory, IO, all these kind of resources we have, right? We will allocate them to execute that query. So here you can define the minimum, maximum level of concurrency, like, how many you wanted to run in parallel, like together. Okay, so yeah, I think that's it about this guy. So we are done with Synapse. That was the theoretical part which I wanted to share with you. So there is nothing a part of that, right? And one other topic which was missed was Delta Lake. So Delta Lake, where is Delta Lake? Yeah, this is Delta Lake. So I haven't really prepared a PPT for this because there's nothing fancy. It is very straightforward. We know what is Data Lake, right? I need you guys, your focus here. I know we are completely switching from Azure Synapse to Delta Lake now. So Azure Synapse is done. Okay, so there is nothing more to discuss in Azure Synapse. We have discussed almost all the important concepts, but I think we will see 3 or 4 important practice questions after this one, so that you get which kind of questions you can expect when it comes to Synapse. I think more or less we've seen everything here in SQL Pool. I think we've seen everything here. Please make sure that you pause this, right? Or else you'll be charged. You can also scale, restore, and everything. Yeah, going back to Delta Lake, right? So we know what is Data Lake. We've discussed, but this was like our first session, Azure Storage Blobs and Azure Data Lakes, right? So Data Lake is like a single storage repository or a storage platform which supports structured, semi-structured, unstructured data. So customer data, video, clickstream, sensor, IoT, emails, all the data will be stored here. And then from this data lake, you can fetch the information related to your data science use cases, ML use cases, or BI use cases or streaming real-time use cases, any kind of use cases, you can pick the data, do your analytics or analysis. So the major issue with this data lakes is all the data is stored in file system, right? That's a big problem we have with data lakes. And the other problem we have with, okay, I think we have a list of challenges here itself. So if you see here, too many small or very big files. So you have files, again, you have to join them. That's another big problem. You don't have indexing, right? When it comes to files which you store in the data lake, you don't have index. So if you wanted to search something, you have to load the data into table and then try to do some indexing. So there is some additional work on that. And again, no caching, because these are like, file systems. So you can't really cache. If the file is very big, you can't cache it. So you have to load that to an external table, create some scope database credentials, then create some file format, then write your queries to execute and see the results. So the other issues we have is you don't have any proper schema. Let's say you have a JSON file with some records and the other JSON file with some different records. So there is no proper standard schema. That's a problem. And small file sizes are bottlenecks, and the sorting is a problem because we are talking about files and we cannot sort them. I mean, that is what, like, indexing is not there, sorting is not there. And if there is a failed production job, if it is failed in between, I mean, it's entirely corrupted, right? I mean, it's like half successful, half failed. So it's like corrupted thing. And like I said, schema, you don't have, lack of consistency. You also don't have consistency. Like I told, you have JSON file with one format, you have JSON file with another format, and you don't have consistency between batch data. You don't have consistency between real-time streaming data. Then what are we talking here? I mean, I praised like anything about data lake in the initial class, and even Microsoft did that, and they still wanted to sell this service to the customer, but they themselves say that we have challenges with data lakes. So what are they going to say to us here? So they want us to use a Delta Lake. So what is Delta Lake? So if you've got these kind of problems, right, with the data lakes, they're asking us to go with the Delta Lake. So Delta Lake is nothing but a table. Okay, so what you do is, instead of data lake, you can leverage Delta Lake. Delta Lake is again part of Databricks. So I think they are the guys who developed this, right? So again, it's an open source, then again licensed to Databricks, and now Delta Lake is part of Azure. That's a history. So here you can create the Delta Lake table. The interesting part with Delta Lake is you can store the batch data, streaming data, and all the dimensions like updates, deletes, inserts, everything in one table. Yeah. I mean, when it comes to this data lake, right, you have batch data coming from different source, streaming data coming from different source, then you have to join that, load that. But here directly from the source, you can connect to that and load and save everything to the Delta Lake. So here Delta Lake is nothing but like, SQL Server table, SQL Server database, which can store structured, semi-structured, and unstructured data. So that is the importance, and that is the main feature of Delta Lake. If you go to some attributes, main differences, you have ACID transactions, right? So what are ACID transactions? I think I've got another thing for that. So ACID properties in DBMS, you have atomicity, consistency, isolation, durability, right? So when you use normal database, right, when you use normal transactional database, you have the entire transaction takes place at once, or it doesn't happen. It's not like, half done and half not done. It doesn't work like that. So this is a property of ACID. So you see all these kind of properties for transactional databases where you store structured data. But what if I say that I will give you all these properties, but you can still store semi-structured and unstructured data? What if I say you that? That is called Delta Lake. Okay, so you leverage the SQL structured database properties, but you store unstructured and semi-structured. If you remember, we've talked about Hive tables, Hive queries, right? So Hive is mainly used, right? You have the files in the Hadoop systems. On top of that files, you create Hive tables and load the data from the files to the Hive tables and use Hive queries to retrieve the data. Then here Hive tables and Hive database will act like a SQL structured database. You don't really feel that you are dealing with Hadoop or file system. Similarly, Delta Lake will also do the similar approach. So here again, scalability and time travel. Here Delta Lake will maintain different snapshots and versions, which we don't have in Data Lake. And other important thing, yeah, it's a unified for batch, streaming, source, and sync. A table in Delta Lake is both a batch table as well as streaming, source, and sync table. This is really important. Okay, streaming data, ingest, batch, historic, backfill, interactive queries, everything out of box in one place, which you can't do in data lake, but you can do in Delta Lake. Okay, and the schema enforcement, right? You are trying to create a table here. So while creating a table, you will define the schema, right? So you are enforced, and you need to create that schema enforcement here, so that you schema enforcement drawback or the challenge which we have in data lake, you have covered that here. And last but not the least, again, you have different things, but I'm just noticing and just highlighting the important things. 100% compatibility with Apache Spark API. So why do we have this? It's because Delta Lake was part of that Apache program, right? Apache development group. So what they have done is, so anyway, we have Apache processing. Let's try to create a storage layer where our Apache can retrieve the data. Again, the storage layer should be like a single stop solution and should be similar to the transactional database. That was the idea behind creating this Delta Lake. So that's how it started. And then they have given 100% compatibility with Apache Spark API. What I mean by this is, so you can run all the Spark queries with these tables. When you run Spark queries, you are running again in memory. So the data is anyway already structured. Now you are running in memory queries. So it is like super fast. So to create delta tables, right? So this is like a Python script. You create like a delta table using Parquet, whatever the compression technique you need to use. Then you run this, right? And usually you create the table, then you load the data into the table, and boom, then you can use like Spark queries or SQL queries, and then to retrieve the data. So I think for me, this is the main difference between Delta Lake and Data Lake. I think you might get 1 or 2 questions on that, right? But just try to understand the difference between Delta Lake and the Data Lake. That's it. So here the challenges, and here what are we trying to overcome those challenges, right? Again, this is an open source, but Delta Lake, it's there in Azure. Okay, so this is all about Delta Lake. I think we are done with this, the codes for Azure data engineering part, right? I might have not shown you few demos, but I might have just explained theoretically some parts. The reason I might have missed those demos is because they are not really important when it comes to exam. And also with the time constant we have, right? I know that we had to stretch a bit on weekends, but now we are doing it because I also wanted to give you some time so that you do your own preparation. At least you have a starting point now, right? So what I can show you is, so if you really wanted to apply for the exam, let me try to DP203 certification. So if I search on this, yeah, now we are talking about exam and the different topics we have. So DP203, so search this guy, and then you can schedule your exam. So based on your region, the prices will vary. I think for India, it's around 4,000. Yeah, 4,800. If you're located somewhere in the Europe, for Norway, I think it should be somewhere. I think it's $165 for Norway. Where is this guy, boy? 165, and for Canada, 165. Yeah. So you can schedule, right? And you can see. I would suggest that to download this skills and exam outline, just to see what are the different topics you have. So mainly you have major topic is on data storage, implementation and designing and developing the data processing system, and security and monitoring and optimizing the data. So you have more this, even though if you don't focus on these 2 things, try to focus on these things. Even if you're really good on these, you can pass the exam. The passing score is around 700. The passing score is around 700, so total 1000. So you'll get around 61 to 65 questions. Out of that, I think you need to you do the math, but 700 is a passing mark. So this is a skill set. If I go to this guy, so you'll have data lake, recommendations, star schema, slowly changing. Okay, there is one other important thing, which is SCDs, right? Okay, SCD, slowly changing dimension. I'll talk about that after this guy. That is also important thing. And develop a batch processing system using Azure Data Factory, Data Lake, Synapse, Databricks. and trigger batches, trigger methods we've talked, ACL for data lake. So just go through this document. I think most of the concepts we have covered. Maybe it might be like a single line statement, which I might have explained, and that's more than enough for you, right? Okay, let me quickly tell you what is slowly changing dimension. It's nothing rocket science. I mean, it's very easy. So for example, slowly changing dimensions, you have three types. Okay, slowly changing dimension one. Do I have a slide for it? Oh boy, I forgot a slide. Okay, so slowly changing dimensions are mainly three types: SCD type 1, SCD type 2, SCD type 3. Okay, let's try to understand these three different types. What is the difference between these types? Okay, so these slowly changing dimensions are only applicable for dimension tables. Okay, forget about facts here, only focus on dimension tables. So here we are talking about customer data. Give me top 1000 rows. Okay, so in this customer data, okay, not really sure if you're able to see it or not. I don't know how I can zoom this guy. Okay, so in this customer data, we are talking about address. Okay, so here, okay, this is the customer data. So here, if the customer wants to update the address, right, what he'll do is he will go to the portal, like, amazon.in, and then out of this address, then he'll go there and click on modify, and then he'll try to update the address. Okay, once he updates the address will be automatically updated here. So here you see address is 4408 Trinity something, and then once he updates this address to 44010, it will be automatically updated. Okay, no new insert, no nothing, no indication, no nothing. Directly, this will be direct update in this column. So that's called SCD type 1. Okay, so that is SCD type 1. What is SCD type 2? When the user updates his address, he will have his old address and there will be a new insert which will be happening below that, and that will be new address. Okay, old address, new address, start date, end date. Just assume that start date, end date of old address, and start date and end date will be infinite date for new address. And there will be like another key which is active, another column which is active, yes or no. For old address, the indication will be no. For the new address, the indication will be yes. So whenever you try to join with this, you also use this indication, like, active yes or no. So that's like an additional join key. So that is called SCD type 2. And that is recommended, and that is usually most of the use cases people use, which is SCD type 2. Okay, because they wanted to track the different versions of the address changes done by the customer. But again, the active address will be the address where you have active key as yes, but you still have different versions from the previous changes. So it will be only insert. It won't do any update. Okay, SCD type 1 will directly update, and you will not know that it is an old one, new one, but it will be the latest one. But SCD type 2 will track and will maintain both the records. So what is SCD type 3? So SCD type 3 is nothing but, here we are talking about old address will be in this row, new address will be in this row, and if he changes another address, it will be in this row. And based on the active key, it will be mentioned in the new column. When it comes to SCD type 3, old address as one column, new address as another column, and if there is another new address, there will be another column. So this will be like horizontally added. Okay, column wise added. And SCD type 2 is row wise added. That's the only difference. The rest everything is same. Okay, and SCD type 3 no one really recommends, but I think there was like one question which came only once in the exam for SCD type 3. But just try to understand the difference. SCD type 2 is recommended, SCD type 1 is direct update, and SCD type 2 is like, you'll have new row inserts, and for SCD type 3 you'll have new columns created based on, for new address one column, for for old address one column, for new address another column, for another new address another column. You still maintain two old columns. So this is the design, or this is the pattern for SCD types. Slowly changing dimensions, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so that's about SCD. That's it. You don't have to understand, or you don't have to dig deep into that. Okay, so when it comes to exam, right, so we've seen like different, I recommend you guys to go through that outline document. And when it comes to this preparation, right, so you already have links and all the theory added by Microsoft here. You don't really have to, like, go and attend any trainings if if you can make yourself preparation. So you have two options: online free and instructor led paid. Just forget about this guy. And Azure for Data Engineer, this will be like very basics. You don't even have to open that because now you're more than basic. And store data in Azure. If I click on this, right? So you will see choose data storage approach in Azure, and then storage account. We have seen what is storage account. This is giving an example to connect an application to storage. And I think we've already done it connecting with Storage Explorer, right? Instead of app, we've used Storage Explorer to connect to that and read the data. Secure, different types. Store data in Azure Blob Storage. That's it. That is what you have in store data. Go back. Then you have data integration at scale with Azure Data Factory or Azure Synapse. So if you try to focus on this, it is giving you either Azure Data Factory or Azure Synapse. The reason is, if you know Azure Data Factory, Microsoft thinks that you also know Azure Synapse pipeline, because in Azure Synapse integration module, right here, integration, where is this guy? This here you create pipeline, right? So this Azure Synapse pipeline is same as Azure, where is this guy? As Azure Data Factory. So that's the reason it gives like either this or this, both are same. So if you go to this integrate data, just try to understand what is integrate, ingestion, data ingestion, and perform code-free transformations. We have seen this using data flow and wrangling using Power Query, right? Populate slowly changing dimensions. You can also populate using this. What is slowly changing dimensions? Either update, insert, row-wise, insert column-wise, type 1, type 2, type 3. They're asking to just try to design that using pipeline. Orchestration, we know why we call it as orchestration. You can add different things, and you can use Data Factory as an orchestration tool. And then operationalize and send and receive data, right, using and transform data. So if you want to just quickly go and see what are the different side headings and main topics, you can do that, but that's up to you, because most of the topics anyway we've covered, and those topics are like, theoretically they have added, and same information will be repeated. If you see some information in integrate, you will have same kind of information somewhere in the populate. So I don't know, they have copied and pasted the information. So most of the time here it says 3 hours 55 minutes, right, for instance. So out of this 3 hours 55 minutes, 2 hours the data and the information will be repeated, same theoretical information. I don't understand why. Okay, because they wanted to give you the history. For example, all of a sudden you wanted to only start this, you don't want to start from this. So then it gives all the background about this, and then it starts building the story. That's the reason maybe. So then you have realize integrate analytical solutions using Azure Synapse Analytics. So here you have all the information about Synapse, introduction, different components, explore Synapse Studio, design a modern data warehouse Synapse, right? We know what is Studio, we have explored it, different options. And then if you come back, work with data warehousing, then all the data warehousing concepts you have within this, design modern, design multi-dimensional schema, right? And use data loading best practices. The best practices we've seen in today's class, distribution techniques, indexing techniques, and all those kind of things. That's what it says. Optimize query performance. You can just go through this using index. You can improve the performance. I mean, that's what it's saying. Integrate SQL. We have seen SQL pool and Apache Spark pools in Synapse, right? And data warehouse features like, dimensions, facts. It's asking us to understand that. Manage and monitor. We've seen we have manage and monitor options here. What we can do there, pipelines and everything we can monitor. Analyze and optimize, and secure data. Again, securing like data masking, auditing. We've seen that in SQL Server database class. Those concepts are again repeated here as well. So that's about that. I think that is done. And then if I show more, we have seen this perform. Work with hybrid transactional analytical processing solutions using Synapse. So when they talk about hybrid, they talk about like on-premise, and they also talk about cloud. So if you wanted to load data from your on-premise to cloud, what option we have? We have Data Factory, we have AZ Copy, we have different options, but within our scope, we have only Azure Data Factory. And using that, which kind of integration runtime you use? You have 3 different types. Self-hosted, right? Because we are trying to load the data from on-premise to cloud. So those kind of concepts you will have in this guy. I think if I open this design and try to understand that architecture, configure. Yeah, so there is one more thing, like I told when we were discussing about Cosmos DB, right? We discussed about Cosmos DB. So usually Cosmos DB is not listed in this list, but we have seen what is Cosmos DB, what is NoSQL, or the different types. So there is one option that where you can link Azure Synapse to Cosmos DB. I think this chapter more talks about what is Cosmos DB and how you can link. I think there is only one option where you can directly link that. So if you wanted to know more about that, you can just quickly, I think this one, configure Synapse link with Azure Cosmos DB. We know what is Synapse, we know what is Cosmos. There is a link between these two. I think that was recently introduced. It wasn't there before. They've added this link. So once you connect this link, you can directly read data from NoSQL database into Azure Synapse. Once you try to read data, then you can query your SQL queries, use Spark jobs to run that data, like semi-structured data and everything you can do in Synapse. So that is what this topic talks about. I haven't seen any questions on this, but you can understand that this is a new topic and maybe they might start asking questions, because for me, DP203 is evolving every day. I mean, there are like so many new questions they're asking every day. So that is that. And data engineering with Azure Databricks, we have seen this. Databricks, Spark architecture, read and write, work with data frames, right? Data frames like columns and advanced methods. You can just go through this. Here you have like advanced pandas, advanced Spark methods. They are talking about like, two technical advanced methods like use aggregate functions, deduplication, perform data manipulation. But don't worry, you won't get any of these technical programming questions. Even if you get, you might get at max 1 or 2. If you don't answer it, no worries, because like I said, 700 is a passing score. You can just, if you don't want to, spend more time on learning language before clearing the certification, no worries. So you can just skip those questions, just, close your eyes and, choose some option, and out of luck, it might be correct as well. But if you wanted to understand too deep into that, you can go and try to understand all these different build and query a data delta lake, right? This is what we've discussed. This is part of Azure Databricks. So you can go and see this guy. Where is this one? Delta Lake. Delta Lake, we've seen this. Processing streaming data. So for streaming data, we've seen stream analytics, but you can also do streaming data processing using Databricks and Databricks Delta Lake architecture and production workloads. Implement CI/CD, DevOps. I don't really think you'll be getting any questions on CI/CD and DevOps. And integrate Databricks with Synapse. You can do that. Best practices. Okay. For instance, if you're attending interview and if they ask what are the best practices you have followed in your previous project, and if you've not really done any project, you can just go through this best practices. But what I'm trying to say here is, I think most of the concepts within this list is also covered. I think almost everything is covered, but when you try to follow the official documentation, right, they'll give like big list, and most of the items within that list might not really be important for the certification perspective. So if you don't really see something which we haven't covered and it's appearing there in the list, don't worry. It means it is not that important. Again, Azure Databricks is done. Then here you have Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2. Okay, we have discussed this. Introduction to Data Lake. So don't get confused between Azure Blob Storage and Data Lake. Both are different, and there is slight variation between that. You need to enable the checkbox, and you have ACLs here. And again, upload data and secure your Azure storage, right? Only 3 concepts you have. This is also important when it comes to exam. And last but not the least, what we have is, we have seen Azure Data Lake. Yeah. Implement a data streaming solution with Azure Stream Analytics. We have seen this. We have seen, I think, 2 or 3 labs as well in this, right? Work with data streams, reliable messages for big data applications using Azure Event Hubs. Just connect as an event hub and then load the data. Ingest data streams using Azure Stream Analytics. We have written query, input, output. We have seen this. Yeah, I think that's it. If you have noticed, you don't have HD Insight in the list, because this is the actual official documentation used learning path to gain the certification. And within this list, you don't have HD Insight, right? That is what actually I was talking about. HD Insight was like the initial big data solution they have added for Azure, but now it is outdated. No more people are using HD Insight. People wanted to use Databricks. People wanted to use Synapse. That is where Microsoft is leading and moving towards. So that is the reason I haven't like really spent more time on HD Insight as well. So like I said, I'll send you that demo, but you don't really have to think much about HD Insight. Just try to understand what it is and what are the different components you have, but you don't have that in the official syllabus document, right? So this is the list which I wanted to go through with you guys. Like I said, almost we have covered everything there, right? If you feel something is missing, just go through that list. And if you feel something is missing and you wanted to learn that, at least you've got some starting point, right? At least you've got like where to start. You've got most of the information, and yeah. So that's about syllabus. And going with practice exams, right? So for practice exams, right, for practice exams, I will recommend this site, examtopics.com. So this is again a free site, right? So you can just create your account, and then here for DP 203, I think this is question. Let me go to previous questions. Okay, for DP 203, if you try to search like DP 203 practice questions, I think you'll get like either fourth or fifth link. I'll also post this link as well, examtopics.com. So within this, what you have is you have around like 61 questions. Okay, so trust me guys, out of the 61 questions, 30 to 40 questions will repeat for you. Okay, because most of the important questions from the latest DP 203 will be updated here, and you have a forum that people will discuss based on the question if it is right or wrong, and you don't have to pay. This is again free. The only thing you need to do is create an account, and that's it. So for most of the exams, I'll also follow this link as well, so that I get like practice, and I get used to the question types and which kind of question I should expect and all. So for this, you have total 61 questions, like I said, and out of the 61 questions, trust me, 30 to 40 will be repeated again. So let's say like, you haven't really followed anything and you haven't prepared anything and you have scheduled an exam, just by heart the answers for these questions, and then you should be good. I'll also try to share a Udemy link where you have like 4 to 5 practice exams there, practice questions. And I've also followed that as well. So there you should expect like 30 questions, and from this 30 questions, so out of 60, you should have like 60. And out of these two, you'll have like 40 to 50 questions, right? And the remaining 10 to 15 questions will be completely new and out of box. And you might see that, these are the completely new questions. I haven't seen them. So that is where you get the training handy, what we have seen, and that knowledge and the experience. And that is where this kind of knowledge will help you to answer those questions. Those questions will be very straightforward, right? But you need to know what is data lake to answer that. You need to know what is delta lake and the difference between that two to answer that question. Okay, so I will also share that Udemy link which I followed. That is really helpful. And before that, I strongly recommend to go through the 61 questions, try to by heart, try to understand the pattern and everything, and try to check into the discussions. In this, if you click on the discussions, you have different approaches from different crowd. Okay, let's quickly go through top 3 questions. I'll also post this link there. So for example, like I said, 20 to 30 questions will be from Azure Synapse, and Synapse is a combination of different services, factory and all those which we have seen. So for example, if you see this question, right, let me zoom it a little bit. So this is a question, and the question might be something like this. You are creating dimensions for data warehouse in Azure Synapse Analytics dedicated SQL pool. Okay, you are trying to create it in a dedicated SQL pool. So you created a table by using this query. Okay, create table, dimension, product key, which is identity key. One other important information I think which I missed is surrogate key. Surrogate key is really important. Surrogate key is nothing but what is primary key, what is foreign key, what is composite key, right? Similarly, you'll also have a surrogate key. Surrogate key is like a unique number which will be sequence number which gets generated. For row 1, it will be 1. For row 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 3. It's like a sequence automatic generated number. So usually surrogate keys in SQL Server will be defined with identity field. Identity 1,1 means it is a surrogate key. So on product key, they are creating a surrogate key. So why do we need to create surrogate key? Because sometimes the primary keys between 2 dimensions can be same. And in that scenario, you might not be really able to join that. So you need another unique key to separate that. So that is where you combine surrogate key, which is product key, and again primary key. That will be like a composite key, right? So in that situation, you will need to add surrogate key. So here surrogate key is a sequence number which will be added. It's an extra column, sequence number. To add a surrogate key, you need to add identity. Okay, that is really important. I think I missed that part. So SCDs, surrogate keys, facts, dimensions, synapse, right? Distribution techniques, partition techniques, indexing. That's it. For Synapse and data warehouse, I think these are the important theoretical concepts which are needed. I think even in all the exams and in all the questions from the certification point of view, they'll only add these. Let's move forward. You have this thing, create table. Okay. create a table with different columns. Use the drop-down menus to select the answer choice that completes each statement based on the information present in the graphic. So here, just try to analyze and try to read this table query, and then drop down. And okay, so here the answer area, right? If you see here, dimension product dash is a dash slowly changing dimension, and product key column is dash. So you need to select from this drop down. Like I told you, dimension product, right? So dimension product is which slowly changing dimension. So obviously it is type 2, and the product key column is surrogate key because it's added identity. So wherever you see this identity, you will use it as a surrogate key. Okay. The reason why I told SCD type 2 is because the best practice by default Azure Synapse asks us to use as type 2. If at all they haven't mentioned any additional condition that, you know, I only wanted to update, I don't wanted to insert, I don't wanted to track any versions, then you opt for SCD type 1. But they haven't given us like any additional information here, like, you know, you need to opt for this logic, you need to opt for this logic. So by default, whenever you create a data warehousing thing, and out of that, you will always choose SCD type 2, and the product key is surrogate key. Okay. And here, I think this is kind of interesting. See, you are designing a fact table named fact purchase in Synapse, dedicated SQL pool. The table contains purchases from supplier for a retail store. Okay. So this is a table. So you have a purchase key, date key, and you have different key, data type, and blah, blah, blah. Here, fact purchase will have 1 million rows of data added daily. Okay. So here we are talking about, like, you know, huge data for fact. The important thing to remember is it's a fact table. We are talking about 1 million rows. And here, select supplier key, stock item count from fact, where date key is this, and group by. Which table distribution will minimize query times? You don't really have to look into the query as well, because it's very straightforward. We've discussed for fact table, right? For fact table, it is always hash, because we are talking about big data, 1 million rows. Fact table, big data, then it is hash. Okay. Oh, for hash, you have two different options. Which one to choose? Hash distributed on purchase key or hash distributed on date key? See, obviously it's hash distributed on purchase key, right? Because purchase key is unique. You don't want it to distribute based on date, right? Because date key, if you do date key, we've seen that the issue, because already by default, we have idle segment of 1 million rows. If you do that, you'll have like big distribution. We don't want that. We want to do it in purchase key on hash on purchase key. If you reveal the solution, you'll also get, you know, like, you know, explanation as well. Click on reveal solution, you'll get explanation as well. What is he saying? Hash distribution table improves query performance on large fact, and they are focused. This round robin tables are useful for loading, and incorrect. Do not use date column. Why? All data for same date lands in stable distribution. Blah, blah, blah. Then only 1 to 60 distributions do not do processing work. That's what we've already seen. Here, another important thing, maybe not this, but this is really interesting. You have an Azure Synapse workspace named My Workspace. Okay. Yeah. So you'll have Azure Synapse workspace named My Workspace that contains Apache Spark database named this guy. So you run the following command: create table, blah, 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 and you have added that. Okay. Now you use Spark to insert row into table. Okay. So 1 minute later, you have already inserted data. 1 minute later, you execute the following query from serverless SQL pool in My Workspace. So what will be the answer? So that's the question. So either it will be like 24, an error, or a null, right? So here, if you see, select employee ID from this table, where name, but here it's employee name, but he gave only name. So obviously, if you try to run this query, it will throw you an error, right? So you need to watch out for simple things. And the other thing is, like, you know, the question, he used Spark to insert the data, but he is querying against serverless SQL pool. This should work, right? Serverless SQL pool, will this work? So I think we have ran the Spark table with SQL query against built-in. so that retrieved the result. So this will work. So don't get confused with this. This will work. But here, instead of employee name, he used only name, and this column doesn't exist. So it will throw him an error. Okay. So again, click on next, and you can see that I think you need to go through this I'm not robot, and then you select that, and then it will be giving you the next page. So you can go through this entire 61 questions. Okay. So I think, yeah, that's what I wanted to share with you guys. So thank you so much for your participation.